The central issues when communities try to deal with persistent antisocial behaviour are often reporting and follow-through. Actually getting the right information at the right time to the right authorities can be a challenge. But then there's also the question of what should happen if you feel that the authorities aren't actually acting. The residents in my development managed to put a stop to persistent antisocial behaviour, but there was definitely a false start when we weren't going about it in the best possible way. So this video is about combating antisocial behaviour effectively without false starts. And before getting into the nitty-gritty of antisocial behaviour reporting and how to do it effectively, we should take a little step back, because there's always going to be a broader context to something going wrong like this, why people are not self-regulating their behaviour in relation to other people around them, why have, there's something which caused that further up the line. A common reason for antisocial behaviour nowadays, in my experience, has been county lines or cuckooing, where a drugs gang intimidates a resident into letting the gang use the resident's home for drug dealing. Lo and behold, persistent antisocial behaviour starts to take root in and around that home. And it might be that the antisocial behaviour is the first evidence that something much bigger has gone wrong. This has grown up, I think, in the last 10 years or so. So everyone's still adapting to the new environment we're in with respect to how drugs gangs organise their activities and how the side effects of those activities become visible and get dealt with. I mention estate covenants here because although there's a sort of general law on nuisance on private estates, which is what most new build estates, anything built in the last 20 years, most new build estates have, you may find that the rules about antisocial behaviour are stricter and easier to enforce. So how does that work? Well, enforcement, which I mentioned, enforcement is 9/10 of the law. Specifically, the question is, against whom can the laws even be enforced? And the general law of the land, which applies everywhere, whether it's a private estate or not, the general law of the land, there's a thing called the law of nuisance, and it allows people to take action against people living in a property that is the source of some kind of nuisance. Although that applies everywhere, it's not useful in a lot of cases because it applies to the tenants of the property, not the landlord of the property, and the tenants might not be worth suing. Not least they just might not have money to pay damages or whatever. However, on new build estates, the landlord is often required to enter into a covenant with all the other landlords, other homeowners, that they will not permit their tenants to engage in antisocial behaviour. So instead of suing the tenants, you could potentially sue the landlord unless the landlord gets the tenants to stop. Now, that means that residents might have an expensive but effective way of going after someone with enough at stake to want to fix the problem. So this video, and I have recently made another video about this topic, but this video is just about two things: how to report antisocial behaviour effectively, and a legal right that you have to follow through on reports that seem not to be being acted upon. So the first port of call is your local council. The question should, if you're going to make a report about antisocial behaviour, to whom do you make this report? Why would you even bother making a report? What do you think might happen from that? Most people might take a very dim view of it, think, well, they won't do anything. But the benefit of reporting this stuff is that since councils and police and other organisations have got limited time, limited resources, limited altruism, they build up data sets of information they've been given that says where the problems are, and then they use that to prioritise. And so if you've got two places that have got the same sorts of levels of problems, but only one of them has got good data that the authorities can act on, then it's more likely that one it will be the squeaky wheel that attracts the oil. So just due to the way the law works, the first people who would be responsible for dealing with antisocial behaviour and receiving reports about it are the council. Not all antisocial behaviour is criminal, and so it's not necessarily the police in most cases. So the council is responsible in particular for dealing with antisocial behaviour, but also with noise pollution, and there's often some overlap. But not all antisocial behaviour is noisy, and not all noise is antisocial. Like, factory noise isn't antisocial behaviour, and some antisocial behaviour is completely silent. But most importantly, most antisocial behaviour is not actually criminal, and so you'd need to think very carefully before going to the police about it. There are some things you can do which are both antisocial behaviour and criminal, and of course those should be reported to the police. And I think the other pattern you'd see is that there's at some incident there's been some antisocial behaviour and something which was criminal, and of course that should be reported to the police as well. So if you witness something that's both criminal and antisocial, report it to the police and to the council. If the antisocial behaviour is housing related and it's related to housing association property, then report it to the housing association as well as the council. And the Grenfell Tower inquiry gave some evidence or brought up some evidence that a council had investigated the housing manager organisation that managed its housing, and found that its records didn't survive an audit. And if you don't trust your housing association or your neighbour's housing association to record your report correctly, you might want to follow up the report a few days later with a GDPR subject access request to make sure that they haven't just deleted your report. Now, you might not have been the witness, but the matter might affect you indirectly as a neighbour. But if you're not the witness, you probably shouldn't be making a report to the authorities. And whatever you do not encourage people to channel reports to the police through a single individual, as that can make that person a covert human intelligence source, or CHIS. So people should be reporting stuff directly, and that means you should be chivying and encouraging people to report things themselves and provide them with the web links and other things to facilitate that. But people have got to do their own reporting. I'd also say strongly discourage people from discussing unreported antisocial behaviour on social media. WhatsApp and Facebook and so on are excellent for getting people in the know, as well as, or instead of Neighbourhood Watch. Someone says, "Oh, I saw this terrible thing," and someone says, "Oh, I saw that as well. I actually had a better angle on it than you," and then think, "Oh, I better go and report that or support someone else's witnessing of it." But WhatsApp and Facebook and similar also provide a pretty low-cost way of blowing off steam, and that increases the overall effort that people have got to undertake to report things. So if you've got a sort of neighbourhood chat and people are mentioning antisocial behaviour they've witnessed there, then they're getting sympathy. It might make them feel a bit better, but it can create the false impression that that the police or the council are aware of what's going on, when in fact all that's going on is that some lines are being added into a database at Facebook, on Facebook servers, and the police are none the wiser. And I think it's quite corrosive, and I don't like it, and I know that people in the local council don't like it. People need to be reporting to the correct authorities. You can put it on social media as well, and be careful about the privacy both of witnesses, victims, and offenders, particularly offenders, because if they're going to be charged with a criminal offence, you absolutely do not want to compromise any upcoming court case by doing anything stupid like that. But social media kind of provides this avenue for people to discuss things without acting on them, and so we shouldn't tolerate unreported antisocial behaviour discussions. If someone brings it up, just politely and firmly tell them, if you haven't reported this, do report it, and don't let people continue to discuss antisocial behaviour incidents that haven't been reported. The focus should be on encouraging the discussion to move towards getting it reported, and then only after it's been reported, considering the any implications or discussing it more generally. And you should get your group moderators to enforce this, or change the moderators, or get out of the group. Make sure that the reference numbers from reports that you've made to the police or the council or others are recorded and logged, so at least someone or a group or an association have got a growing log of the incidents, you can step back and take a broader view over time. Now, there is this thing called the community trigger. It's part of the law since 2014, and it was brought in following the suicide of Fiona Pilkington. It's a very sad case. Fiona Pilkington committed suicide after authorities had ignored dozens of her complaints about the antisocial behaviour and thugs that were ruining her lives. So in 2014, Parliament introduced something called the ASB case review. This is section 104 of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014, just rolls off the tongue. And antisocial behaviour case reviews are where agencies sit down and look back over how they handled a situation of persistent antisocial behaviour. ASB case reviews were modelled on domestic homicide reviews, but obviously since no one's died, the way that they're brought about is not sort of an automatic thing. How do I rephrase that? A domestic homicide review is just something which the law requires to happen after a domestic homicide. But for an antisocial behaviour case review, where they go back and look at how the authorities dealt with antisocial behaviour, the trigger for it is not that someone's died at home, or been killed at home, rather. The trigger for it is that an individual member of the community can make an application for this sort of review. That's a statutory right, but it's conditional on, a bunch of fairly complicated conditions, which we'll just go into now. So members of the community have got a statutory right to compel a review of agencies' response to persistent antisocial behaviour. And the way the law is drafted, it is any person, which means human beings and companies, can request an antisocial behaviour case review. So the community trigger is the mechanism whereby you get an antisocial behaviour case review. There's no other formal statutory way of doing that, and so the two things are sort of joined at the hip. One is the community trigger is only useful for causing ASB case reviews, and ASB case reviews are only triggered by members of the community. One is how you make the other happen, and that's why you often see the two terms, community trigger, ASB case review, being used almost interchangeably, because they are two halves of the same process. So to use the community trigger to get an antisocial behaviour case review and have people go back and look at whether there was something they could have done differently or ought to have done differently, there is you apply to the council. I'm not going to read out this whole slide. If you need it, just pause. But basically, you send a letter to the council demonstrating that 3 separate recent antisocial behaviour incidents have been reported to the authorities, and that you want that situation reviewed. If your claim checks out that there were 3 separate but related incidents at different times, same place, and that they were properly reported on time to the police, council or housing association, and the council will organise a review, but they will spend a couple of days trying to work out whether your report saying that, well, we seem to have been ignored a few times, is actually accurate. They might, so eventually they will sit down and have a meeting, normally with the police, council, housing association, and maybe someone from the NHS. So they'll have the meeting. The meeting can make binding recommendations about any matter that's come up. They might invite you to attend part of the meeting. I've been to 2 of them, and in practice, the benefit of it, you may think, well, what's the point of having a meeting? Well, it does have some very beneficial effects. When we use the community trigger here, it's eventually one of the premises was shut down by the police and then the magistrates' courts, and there were other measures put in place, and fairly quickly the significant problems across the development reduced massively. But the community trigger process incentivizes people to stick to adequate and effective reporting of antisocial behaviour to the right authorities. And as a community, that's what you should be encouraging as well. The setup rewards pro-social behaviour, and it takes some effort to find the paperwork relating to 3 different reports about 3 different incidents, which might have been seen by different people. Putting that all together requires some effort, and it signals to the authorities that there's one or generally a lot more than one people who are prepared to put in the effort to get them the information they need, that they're taking it seriously, and therefore the council and police ought to take it seriously as well. It's a difficult to fake signal, given how difficult it is to qualify for the community trigger with these 3 different incident reports. There's a slightly negative point here. Some agencies, and I'm not really talking about the police here, or councils, some agencies rely on what I'd call reporting fatigue. It isn't particularly unreasonable to rely on reporting fatigue, because some reports will be frivolous or vexatious or whatever, they're frankly just made up. Others will be exaggerations, but within that there's going to be genuine reports of actual problems. And so you do want to have a bit of a disincentive for people wasting time. But I think that in a lot of cases, reporting is made way too difficult, and that's a problem. But it does partition residents into those who will persist in trying to get situations resolved and those who won't. And it's useful to know who can be relied on for the long haul. So, it's sort of a Darwinian effect there. So here's a quick recap of some tips. I think I've been through all of those already. So thank you for watching. Do get in touch if you've got useful feedback. Also, go back and try episode 3 if it looks like it might be useful for you. Episode 3 is the previous video. A few days ago I uploaded this thing to YouTube. But that video is about half an hour of me rambling without really being able to read my script. On this same topic. It provides more detail. I was travelling. I didn't have my normal kit for making videos, so I had a script, but I couldn't read the script whilst the slides were being recorded onto the video, and therefore there's a lot of waffle and ums and ahs. But the detail and content might still be useful for someone. But if you've seen this video, it probably suffices for explaining. But there is some stuff in the previous episode that might be useful. So, as it's customary to say, it would generally help me if you were to subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell other people that you know. And until then, happy antisocial behaviour reporting. Stay safe. Thank you.